Hello friends, welcome back to a new vlog. I am using the sock mic that I got from a YouTuber I really like named Yusuf. I will link her channel down below with her latest video. And I thought I would just do like a little chatty catch-up kind of video. Originally, I started filming like an eating disorder video early on today, but I got really discouraged and unmotivated. I think I'm just feeling the depression TM today a little bit, which I'm a little caught off guard by sometimes now because I'm so used to feeling like a lot more good, I guess, a lot better than I used to in the past. But I think this chat will still talk a bit about body image and eating disorders, especially for women of color. So I do want to give a content warning if you think you might be triggered by any sort of talk around bodies or eating disorders or food. I do encourage you to click out of this video, go watch something else. I'll leave a card up there that you can click on if you like. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started. I guess I want to just start by giving a very brief history on my relationship with food and eating disorders. I grew up with a pretty, wait, let me take a sip of coffee. Third shot today, really needed it today. I grew up with a pretty intuitive relationship to food. I was very lucky in that I grew up in a household where we didn't really have too much diet culture going on. My parents really didn't label foods as good and bad. And I ate a large variety of foods, mostly Korean food, and I had a very intuitive, very healthy, and joyful relationship to eating. That sort of changed as I grew up and started going through puberty especially, and started gaining weight. I first sort of had a very long phase of orthorexia where I was very obsessed with eating clean. I started really categorizing foods into good and bad and tried to exercise a lot and was pretty restrictive with how I ate. And then that sort of transitioned into binge eating for a bit. And then eventually into anorexia, where I was eating not only the type of food I was eating, but I was eating very small quantities. I did end up having to get an endoscopy because of digestive issues, which turned out to be purely mental. And I went through a pretty intense phase of around, I would say, like 2 years of recovery. And that sort of started toward the end of my senior year in high school, actually through YouTube, because I don't remember exactly why, but someone suggested like I might have an eating disorder. Maybe it was my sister or someone. And then I started watching eating disorder content on YouTube, found a lot of similarities to myself, except the fact that at that point I mistakenly thought that I was too fat to have an eating disorder. And then that sort of started a whole journey of recovery, which involved seeking professional help as well as a lot of online content, but most importantly, just being really personally motivated and really taking a lot of time to investigate my relationship to my body and food. Although, as I mentioned, I was very fortunate to be given the space, the opportunity to develop a really intuitive relationship with food, I do think I grew up in a somewhat fat-phobic environment, like most of us, and I thought being fat was really bad, and like fat people were lazy, and I didn't want to be fat, and I think on Korean media, which was primarily the stuff I grew up watching, they really glorified thinness, and Korea has like extreme diet culture. All the celebrities are always dieting, and it's very like visually focused in the industry, and that definitely seeped into my consciousness, and I really glorified being thin and like really wanted to succeed at dieting and losing weight, and thought that would be like some sort of proof of my inherent value. My eating disorder really exacerbated when I went to high school because I attended a Catholic private school where there was a lot of wealthy white folks, and it was my first time being in that sort of environment because I had grown up in a mostly immigrant Asian American community, and a lot of the insecurities and lack of confidence and lack of social like capital, I guess, that I had in that environment, I took out on hating myself and my body. I sort of fell into this trap of believing that if only I lost weight and I became like more physically small, I guess, I would be able to fit in and be liked and be loved, and I would deserve to be loved and liked. So the process of recovery for me was really about physical restoration, but also about like becoming aware of like the fat phobia and diet culture that I lived in and that I had ingested and participated in, being aware of why those things were problematic, and also really finding other places to place my value on besides my physical appearance. And I think that sort of was occurring in tandem with me really like choosing to become an English major and committing to like studying like social justice and racial justice and things like that, and just really finding a lot of the things that I'm interested in and really passionate about today. And I think one huge misconception that the media really perpetuates about eating disorders is that they only happen to cis, straight, white women, but really they can happen to anyone of any gender and any appearance and any race. The most important thing I think that I really want to hammer in here is that eating disorders can happen to anyone of any body type. And something that I really rarely see being discussed is thin privilege, which I think is very, very prevalent in our society and very invisible in a lot of ways. And I think my own definition of thin privilege is simply that because you are genetically predisposed or wealthy enough to like have certain environmental conditions and like certain resources to be thin, you are privileged in that maybe more people find you attractive, you have more potential partners, you have more career opportunities, you have more friends, you have more social opportunities, and eventually you gain more wealth and social capital and things like that. And I think for folks living in marginalized bodies, acquiring those things can be much more difficult. And there's constantly this sort of shame that is, we all perpetuate about people in larger bodies and how it's their own fault, or they need to be healthier, or they need to just like, I guess, get themselves together or something, or stop being lazy, which are all these lies that are perpetuated by diet culture, which tells us if you lose weight and you are thin, then you are deserving of certain things and you are more worthy than people who are gaining weight or are fat. And there's really so much like factors about like race and class tied into this. Like if you look on YouTube and see all those people drinking like their kale smoothies and shit, it's like, you know, there's a certain kind of person who's able to afford pulverizing a perfectly good vegetable into a juice. I'm not saying doing that is bad, but I'm saying like there's certain people who are able to do that and not certain people who are not. And but then we attach so much like internal value to that. Like people who are eating healthy are the ones who are taking care of themselves, getting ahead in life, doing the right thing, people who are admirable, and then people who maybe don't have as much time or money to eat certain foods are not as valuable and not as worthy. Pretty much all of my friends and family members have said at least one fat phobic thing that has kind of irked me. For example, a lot of people say things like, oh, that's bad, you shouldn't eat that, or I'm gonna cut out sugar, or I've gained weight, I need to lose weight, or she's so pretty, she's so thin, I want to be like that. So I think it's really, really important that we pay attention to the kinds of language that we're using and how maybe we are glorifying certain kinds of bodies and certain and wealth and things like that, and putting down other people. And I think a lot of times the argument that people give for like perpetuating fat phobic ideas is that it's natural, or that we are more naturally attracted to certain body types, or it's unhealthy and causes like certain health issues or something like that. And while I can't claim to be a doctor or something and know everything about the health issues part, I do know that there is so much fat phobia in medicine, and so much misunderstanding about eating disorders. Like, for example, for me, I didn't get my period for the longest time because of my eating disorder, and when I went to the doctor to talk to her about it, they just gave me like hormones to unnaturally kind of induce my period, rather than trying to figure out like what the underlying issue was. And I know there's so many people who share stories of being really treated really badly at the doctor and just told to lose weight for literally everything just because they're fat, and not getting properly diagnosed for whatever underlying issue they were having. I think it's super important that we recognize like fat phobia is not something that's natural. It's not something that's justified in any way. And it's very much a created system of oppression, like racism or sexism or homophobia. There is a system in place working to oppress people in bigger bodies and uplift those who are in smaller bodies. And I think especially as someone who identifies as a woman, a big part of my recovery was trying to learn not to be small, and not just not to be small physically, but mentally, emotionally, everything, not to shrink back in social situations and in classrooms and in meetings, and to believe that I am worthy of attention and love, and I have something valuable to offer. And I think a lot of times that trying to be small really directly physically manifests in trying to shrink ourselves. Whether you're a woman or a man or non-binary or whatever, but I think especially for marginalized folks who are not raised to take up space. But once again, I want to reiterate, no matter your gender or race or sexuality or body type, you can have an eating disorder. So I guess what I want to offer now are just some thoughts on how we can actively practice anti-diet culture attitudes and be actively anti-fatphobic in our everyday lives. So firstly, going back to what I mentioned earlier, I think language is super important. It's very, very crucial that we all pay attention to how we're talking about ourselves when we've gained weight, when we've lost weight, and about our friends and family when they've gained or lost weight. Are you saying things like, oh, I've gained weight, I'm a bad person, I've been lazy, I've let myself go, things like that, implying that becoming fat is somehow a lowering of your own worth and value? And are you saying things like, oh, I've lost weight, like I've been really put together, I've been on my game lately, really valorizing losing weight and complimenting people for losing weight, and really cementing that beauty ideal that thinness is more beautiful and fatness is not. Secondly, I think it's very important that we practice cultivating an intuitive relationship to food. And that looks different for everyone, but I think some things I mentioned in this video, including not labeling foods as good and bad. So commonly we say things like ice cream is bad, fruits are good, or whole grain is good, white bread is bad. And are you categorizing food in that way in your brain, or are you really letting yourself be free and eat whatever you want at whatever quantities you want? It's really, really important that we don't firstly attach our value to what we eat and how we look, and secondly, we don't limit ourselves and restrict ourselves, because that only results in more negative relationships to food, and our relationship to food really influences the relationship to food other people around us have, especially if you're a parent or if you have a partner or something like that. And then thirdly, I think it's important that we follow a variety of body types on our social media, and we should really pay attention to what sort of people are you finding beauty in? Who do you follow on your Instagram? Is it all thin white bodies, thin white cis bodies, or are there like, fat bodies, non-cis bodies, and things like that, so that we aren't perpetuating the narrow ideal of beauty that traditional media has, brainwashed us into believing. And finally, I think the really core part of anti-diet culture, anti-fatphobic work is taking the time to really do the internal work, do the introspection, really examine what your relationship with food and body is right now, whether you place a lot of your personal value on that. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't place any of our value on that. I think to me, things like fashion and really liking the way I look are important to me, but I've learned through my recovery to not like the way I look because I'm thin and not like the way I look because I'm fat. Obviously, it's still a work in progress. There's a lot of days when I am not very happy with the way I look. So yeah, just to go back to the point, really paying attention to what you're looking at, because that's really gonna cement the ideas about beauty and value and worth that you have in your mind. So yeah, I think that's all I really have to say today. I really hope that we can work toward a society in which we don't shame people for food or body and perpetuate such systems of oppression. Leave your thoughts down below if you have any you want to share, and don't forget to like this video and hit the subscribe button if you want to watch more of my content. I do some talking videos like this, and then a lot of like weekly/daily vlogs. I hope you are all doing well, taking care of yourselves, having whatever day you need to, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!